Motives. Woo, there we go. We're back. All right. So motives matter. What's a motive? It's the sense of need, desire, fear, etc., that prompts an individual to act, to begin to do something. And then the ulterior motive is the motive under the motive. So we're going to be talking about that a lot today. There was a little girl. Well, actually, the mom tells the story. Her name was Jania. She lived in British Columbia. She talks about the time her 7-year-old daughter had just won $2 in Sunday school for her memory work. After the morning service, the pastor's wife congratulated her. The little girl proudly announced, "And I put it all in this morning's offering." "Oh, how wonderful," the pastor's wife said. "I'm sure God will be pleased." "Yes," the child replied, "and now maybe God will let me do some of the things I want to do." Bad motive, right? Out of the mouths of babes. But have we ever thought that? Even if we don't verbalize it, we can get into the, well, God owes me. Well, I did this for you. Now you got to do this for me. I deserve this. Let's just shoot that one down right now. We deserve nothing. Okay, I loved it. This one lady, in her moment of probably the worst time of her life, she just got it right. She spoke truth. Her husband was dying. They were both believers. She's by his bedside in hospice. And his brother comes to visit to say goodbye. Brother's a non-believer. And his brother just looked at him laying there and getting ready to go home. And he looks at him. He says, "He does not deserve this." And his wife, the man's wife, just looked right at him and said, "No, you know what? We deserve hell. Every single one of us. And Jesus Christ came to save us from that. We deserved hell. Every single one of us, because we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And Jesus came and gave his life for ours. He paid our debt." Okay, so we can't get into what we deserve and don't deserve. So we never, ever can think that God owes us. We owe him everything, don't we? Anybody else died for you? He did, because of his great love and because he's rich in mercy. So we need to clean up our hearts and make sure that our motives are good and right. Psalm 26:2, "Put me on trial, O Lord, and cross-examine me. Test the motives of my heart." That's Psalm 26:2. Boy, that's a brave prayer, isn't it? Proverbs 16:2, "People may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives." Anybody else here pure in their own eyes? We can clean up good, can't we? We can rationalize, we can justify, I tried to rationalize having Cheetos the other night. Like right before bed, I haven't had any Cheetos all day. That gives me license to have Cheetos at 10 o'clock, okay? Rationalize, justify anything. People may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives. Proverbs 21:27, "The sacrifice of an evil person is detestable, especially when it's offered with the wrong motives." Jeremiah 17:10, "But I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. I give all people their due rewards according to what their actions deserve." And then finally, 1 Corinthians 4:5, and there's loads of them. I just picked some out. You can just put motives in the search box of blue letter Bible, and it'll spit out so many. But 1 Corinthians 4:5, "So don't make judgments about anyone ahead of time before the Lord returns, for he will bring our darkest secrets to light and will reveal our private motives. Then God will give to each one whatever praise is due." So that can make us nervous. Oh my gosh, my private motives are going to be revealed. But it's okay when we submit to the Lord and ask him to help us clean up our motives. Our God can do anything. Remember, I talked about in previous lessons, Mark 9, where the desperate father whose kid was demon-possessed, and he asked Jesus, "If you can do anything." And Jesus, of course, comes back with, "If." All things are possible with God. And so the father comes back with, "I do believe. Help me in my unbelief." We talked about how God can even help us believe more in him. God can even help us trust more in him, so God can most definitely help us clean up our motives. A.W. Tozer said, "It's not what a woman does that determines whether her work is sacred or secular. It's why she does it." Listen to that again. It's not what a woman does that determines whether her work is sacred or secular. It's why she does it. And that's A.W. Tozer. Let's just use a super easy example just to start out. We can see that, I might have some work to do here or there. Never thought about it like that. Again, Proverbs 16:2, New Living Translation. "People may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives." Our motive always needs to be to please God. It's not about people. So think about it. Just think about when you've given someone constructive criticism. Okay, constructive criticism. It may actually be destructive jealousy, since the easiest way to raise our own status is to bring somebody else down. Are you willing to question your motives before you offer criticism? Does the critical finger you point need to be pointed first at yourself? The motives behind the criticism are always more important to deal with than the criticism itself. Listen to that again. The motives behind the criticism are always more important to deal with than the criticism itself. We've got to say, why am I saying this? Is there anything in me that is leading me to say this? Jealousy, any of that kind of stuff. A child of God must be conscious of the motives and always ask, Lord, is this pleasing and honoring to you? Just basic motives. Satan's. Let's just look at some easy one. Satan's motives. John 10:10. To steal, to kill, to destroy. Satan has no good motive toward any of us. His stated mission, steal, kill, destroy, John 10:10. Okay? And he never labels the bottle with what's truly in it. He tries to sucker you in by making it good and looking wonderful and all these things. He tries to make it appear that way. We go back. What's his motive? Steal, kill, destroy. To keep you away from Jesus, to keep you away from heaven. Let's just call it what it is. What's the motive of Jesus? To seek and save the lost. Okay, that's Luke 19:10. The motive of Christ at his heart is to seek and save the lost out of great love for us. He left the glory and splendor of heaven and came down to our pit, down here to save us, to seek and save the lost. That's his motive. And what's so cool is we're going to see today, when we talk about, okay, here's my heart, Lord, I'm opening it up, look at my motives. You know what? You're opening yourself up to the one whose motives are always pure. God's motives are always pure. So when you open yourself up to that, you're being looked at and examined by the one with good, pure motives. We can't say that about people all the time, but we can say it about our Lord. So Satan came to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus came to seek and save the lost. We're going to look at the Pharisees today. Just remember, Pharisee rhymes with, hey, look at me. That's what they were all about. Hey, look at me. Ain't I great? Okay, how great I art. Okay, that was their song. Okay, before it was even a thing. The Pharisees, in the words of Jesus, you can look it up, Matthew 23:5, they do all their deeds to be seen by others. Don't miss the all. Matthew 23:5, the Pharisees do all their deeds to be seen by others, and that's Jesus saying that. And we're not going to be negative. We're going to look at some positive examples, some negative examples, but when you look at motives, they're not all negative. My goodness, how many times has your heart been in the right place and you've really tried to do something to bless someone and they've looked at it the wrong way? They misinterpreted. So it's not all negative. Sometimes we have really good motives that are interpreted the wrong way. If you want to read a story about that, read 1 Samuel 16 and 17. So David gets anointed. Okay, God sends Samuel to the house of Jesse, and they do the son parade. Bring all your sons in, because God had said one of them's going to be the king. God knew which one. When Samuel went, God hadn't revealed to him which one yet. So here comes the son parade, and Eliab, he looks good. No, it's not him, it's not him, it's not him. They go through all 7 sons. And then Samuel looks at Jesse and says, do you have any more sons? David was such an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, there's one more, but he's out with the sheep. He doesn't even count. When you said to bring all my sons before you, I didn't even think about him. He's just out there. Well, that was the one that God wanted. Because man looks at the outward appearance, but what does God look at? The heart. The whole thing about our study, the matters of the heart. So in comes David, and he's anointed to be the future king, right? Well, then we have the whole David and Goliath episode. And so the armies of Israel are just quaking before Goliath. So Jesse said to David, hey, go bring your brothers some food. Some of his brothers were on the front line. Bring them some food. See how they're doing. Check on them. So David does that. And while he's there, he's just a young man. He's curious. He starts asking questions. What's going on? What's the king going to do? Those kind of things. And one of his brothers just tees off on him. You're only here because you want glory and this, that, and the other, and all about that. David had good motives. He was in obedience to his father. He brought the food and was checking on his brothers, everything he was supposed to do. And his brother, out of his own jealousy or whatever, led to it questioned David's good motives. So sometimes we can even do things out of the best, purest, goodest, if it was a word, motives, and people take it wrong. But our Lord knows. Sometimes we can do the right things for the wrong reason. If we go to Matthew, and you don't have to flip there if you don't want to, but Matthew 5, after you go through the Beatitudes, this is what our attitude ought to be, right? Go through the Beatitudes, and then Jesus starts talking about bad stuff, bad things. He talks about anger and murder and hatred and lust and adultery. Jesus is talking about bad things for that part of Matthew 5. And then right as we transition into chapter 6, which remember, in the Bible, originally as it was written, there were no chapter and verse divisions. So we have right here where we're talking about, Jesus is talking about bad things, right? Bad things, killing, lust, adultery, murder. And then he transitions right into good things done for the wrong reason. Okay, chapter 6 of Matthew begins right with good things done for the wrong reason. And Jesus himself, right in the beginning of verse 1 of chapter 6 of Matthew, says, beware. When our Lord tells us to beware, what should we do? Beware. This is a big deal. God himself is saying, watch out. What's he telling us to watch out for? Exactly what we're talking about today, having right motives. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you'll have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. And so he goes into the whens. When you give, when you pray, when you fast. And he starts going through the whens, because we're supposed to do these things. We're supposed to give. We're supposed to pray. We're supposed to fast. But we're supposed to do it with the right reason. Okay, so he starts out, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do. They just do it to be seen. Let your giving be in secret, and your Father who sees everything in secret will see you. It started out as a good reason. What used to happen was outside the temple and in various places, they had these metal pots. And if you had an extra coin, you could throw it in there for a needy person, a person that didn't have money for food. And they would come and take the coin and go buy food. It started out that simple. But then they went, but the people in need don't know there's money in the pot. So they started to blow a trumpet when somebody put money in. It started out for a good reason. If I need food and you just threw a coin in, the trumpet goes off, I know, okay, now I have means to go buy food. But what the Pharisees did, they would stand there and drop their coin in and then say, okay, blow the trumpet. Let all see who just did it. Okay, hey, look at me. They were doing a good thing, giving to the poor, but for the wrong reason. It wasn't for God's glory. It wasn't because they love God's people. It was a total, hey, look at me. Wrong reason. I really like this one, and this is true. Vandals, this was a long time ago, they cut down 6 huge royal palm trees along a major Miami boulevard. The city wasn't sure if they could replace palms that big. They were quite expensive. Then somebody donated 6 more, even bigger ones. They even had them planted, this company that donated one. The old ones were 15 feet high and a nice foreground to a billboard that said Fly Delta. The new ones were 35 feet high, completely hiding the sign. The new donor was Eastern Airlines. Okay? They did something nice. They did a good thing for the wrong reason. Okay? So we're giving, which is when you give, for the right reason, to glorify God. That's why he says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Okay, just in secret, so your Father sees you. It's not about anyone else. It says the same thing about you pray. When you pray in verse 5, and when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites. They love to stand out there in front of everybody and pray so all can hear. Okay, but when you pray, shut the door. Go into your room. Talk to your Father in secret. And it can be the car door. It can be a closet door. It can be your it doesn't matter. The point is, shut the door and just go in and talk to your daddy alone, you and him. Not for everyone else to hear how eloquent you are. I really, really like Bill Moyer, and this is what he did. When Lyndon Johnson was president, he had several guests in for a meal at the family room of the White House. LBJ had given the honor of saying grace to Bill Moyer. He was an ex-Baptist minister. As Moyer began to softly say grace, President Johnson, who couldn't understand what was being said, interrupted Moyers and said, "Speak up, man." Without looking up and barely stopping him mid-sentence, Bill Moyer replied, "I wasn't talking to you." Okay? He was talking to his Father. And that was what's important, okay? I got to tell you the truth. And I know, like the church my son goes to, when he's a youth pastor, when he does the prayer before, they've written it down because they have so many things. So it tends to go on a while. But in my mind, usually when someone goes really, really, really long with a public prayer, it means they don't spend a whole lot of time talking to God in private. They got to get everything in, right? Just a thought. John Bunyan said, in prayer, it's better to have a heart without words than words without heart. John Bunyan, in prayer, it's better to have a heart without words than words without a heart. Prayer is an awesome and wonderful thing. That's going before our Lord and Savior. It's going before our Daddy. It's asking for help between you and Him. And I'm not saying we don't pray for other people, with other people. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying primarily to establish the relationship, to keep the relationship going, to give it depth, we go before our Lord. We've talked about just that quiet communication in our hearts without words sometimes, just before our Lord in fellowship and communion. Another biblical example of where you can see that the motives weren't right, Acts 4. Acts 4, remember Barnabas? He's called the son of encouragement. Acts chapter 4, starting in verse 32. This is talking about the early church. Now, the full number of those who believed were of one heart and soul. That's Acts chapter 4, verse 32. And no one said that any of the things that belonged to him were his own, and they shared everything. So if you were hungry and I had extra food, I'd give it to you, and vice versa. If you have an extra cloak and I don't have one, you'd give it to me. They just shared. Early church was persecuted. They had a lot of needs, and they just shared everything among them. Some people will jump on something like this and say, see, they were communistic. That has nothing to do with that. It's loving God and loving people. Okay, they love God, so they shared with the people that God loves, that we're supposed to love too. So that's what it was all about. So Barnabas, it says in chapter 36, thus Joseph, who was also called by the apostle Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, he sold a field that belonged to him and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. So I have this piece of land, I sell it, and I come give the money to you, and you're going to be a good steward and help people with it. Okay? And when chapter 5 starts, it begins with a but. Because you know what? There's always a but. Isn't there? Always a but. But a man named Ananias and his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property. And with his wife's knowledge, he kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, wasn't it yours? And after it sold, wasn't it your disposal? Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to man, but to God. So Barnabas, the people saw it, and it was done with good motives. It was done to help people. Ananias and Sapphira, different motives. It was a, hey, look at me. They didn't give the full amount, and Peter right here is saying it's not about the amount. This was your land before you sold it. This is your money after you sold it. But you're trying to make it look like you're giving the whole thing when you held some back. Okay, and that's why I said, why have you lied? You've not lied to man, but to God. Ananias heard these words. He fell down and breathed his last, and great fear came upon all those who heard of it. The young men rose and wrapped him up and carried him out and buried him. He was struck dead right there. God knew his motives, just like all those verses we looked at. God knows the motive of the heart, and he showed Peter. He showed Peter here, Ananias, why'd you do this? And Ananias dropped dead, and I want you to make sure you catch this. After an interval about 3 hours, his wife comes in, not knowing what had happened. Ananias' body isn't even cold yet. And here comes Sapphira, and Peter said, tell me whether you sold the land for so much. And she said, oh yes, so much. She had her own chance to tell the truth. She had her own chance. I don't care if you're married, dating, whatever you are responsible for your actions. You are responsible before the Lord. So the husband lies. She still, it shows us right here, is responsible to tell the truth. But she lies too. So guess what's going to happen to her? How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door, and they're going to carry you out too. So she falls down dead. Okay? Motives. Motives matter. Barnabas gave out of the right motive, out of his heart. Ananias and Sapphira are, hey, look at me. Look what I just did. let's just make it easy for us to understand too. Let's just work through it. Say we see a man give $20 to a blind man, okay? God knows the motive, but we see somebody give $20 to a blind man and we're impressed. Oh, that was a nice thing to do. What we don't see is the motive. It could be he wanted to be seen by you and others watching, so you think he's very generous. I like this. He may have stolen the blind man's cane the day before and is now easing his conscience by giving him the money he got for selling it. He may be repaying the blind man for a loan he received from him 6 months earlier with not a penny of interest. He may have been asked to help the blind man get to his mother's house to visit, but he was too busy, so he just gave him $20 for an Uber. He may feel grateful to God for his own sight, and he's moved with compassion to share some of his blessings with this man to encourage him. Ding, ding, ding. Right answer, right? But we just got to it in number 5. Those 4 things prior could have been the motive instead of that. The act is the same, in this case to the observer, but whether it's good, merely selfish, or even evil can't be seen. Jesus sees. J.P. Morgan was very cynical when he said, a man always has 2 reasons for doing anything. A good reason and the real reason. Okay? 2 reasons for doing anything. That's just J.P. Morgan. It's a secular quote, but a good reason and the real reason. Why do we do things? We may have been raised to do these things, good, kind acts, in quotes, and we feel comfortable doing them. We may feel uncomfortable because we feel guilty if we don't, so we want to escape the guilt feelings. We may just feel that religion is the in thing, and we want to go with the flow to be part of the culture. We may fear hell, so we're compelled by our fears to conform in hopes of escaping judgment. We may feel a deep desire for heaven, so we are religious for the sake of external rewards. We may feel family and social pressure, so we're doing it for human approval. We may be like the Pharisees and see there's power in the approval of people and be motivated to do that. But the approved solution is always we need to be genuinely motivated by love for Jesus. Love God, love people. That's why we do things, for God's glory. This guy really understood it. His name, Paul Metzger, is the one who writes this story, but this is a true story about a man named John Perkins. He's an African-American Christian leader from Mississippi. He was nearly beaten to death in the 70s for his work promoting racial justice. Metzger was driving the now elderly Dr. Perkins to a benefit dinner in Portland, Oregon. Perkins was a keynote speaker at the dinner, which was raising money for inner-city ministry that brought jobs and housing to ex-offenders and youth. As they drove along, Metzger asked Dr. Perkins what it was like for him now in Mississippi. Dr. Perkins replied matter-of-factly, well, I'm kind of a hero now in Mississippi. It seems that every time the state newspapers write something about reconciliation, they quote me. It's as if I created the word, he said with a laugh. But then there's a pause in the conversation, and he's looking out the window, and he said, but when I think about how many homes my fame has built for the poor people in Mississippi, I realize my fame hasn't built a single home for the poor. So I put no stock in my fame. This guy got it. There were no television or newspaper reporters in the car, just Dr. Perkins, his daughter Elizabeth, and then Paul Metzger, who was driving. He said he almost lost control of the car. I rarely come across such a value system, even in my own heart. And then he goes on to say, the Christian celebrity leverages the gospel for his or her own benefit. I bet there's a name going through your mind right now, isn't there? Christian celebrity leverages the gospel for his or her own benefit. The saint asks God to leverage his or her own life and fame for the gospel and for people. The celebrity wants to be famous. The saint wants to be influential so others might meet Jesus. The saint wants to be influential so others might meet Jesus. There's a difference between shining and putting on a show. Just let the light of Jesus shine through you. I love this lady. She wrote a letter. Her name is Jessie Rice. In the letter, this is what it's addressed to, dear fear of what others think. This is what she writes. I'm sick of you, and it's time we broke up. I know we've broken up and gotten back together many times, but seriously, fear of what others think, this is it. We're breaking up. I'm tired of overthinking my status updates on Facebook, trying to sound more clever, more funny, more important. I'm sick of feeling anxious about what I say or do in public, especially around people I don't even know all that well, all in the hope that they'll like me, accept me, praise me. I run around all day feeling like a golden retriever with a full bladder. Like me, like me, like me. Because of you, I go through the day with a cloud of shame hanging over my head. And I never stop acting. The spotlight's always on, and I'm the center stage, and I better keep dancing, posturing, smiling, mugging, or else the spotlight's going to move. And I'll dissolve into a little meaningless puddle on the ground, just like the witch in Wizard of Oz. I can never live up to the expectations of my imaginary audience, the one that lives only in my head, but whose collective voice is louder than any other voice in the universe. And all of this is especially evil because if I really stop and think about it and let things go quiet and listen patiently for the voice of God who made me and the Savior who died for me, in his eyes it turns out that I'm actually profoundly precious, lovable, worthy, valuable, she says, and even a little ghetto fabulous. When I find my true identity in Christ, then you turn back into the tiny, yapping little dog that you are. So eat it, fear of what others think. You and I are done. And no, I'm not interested in talking it through. I'm running, jumping, laughing you out of my life once and for all. Or at least, listen to her honesty here, or at least that's what I really, really want. God, help me. It doesn't matter what others think. Your Father in heaven is cheering you on and saying, that's my girl. Isn't she awesome? Isn't she great? And of course, Satan's going, did you see what she just did? And Jesus is going, yeah, and she's covered with my blood. So isn't she great? Isn't she awesome? Isn't she beautiful? That's what he's saying about you. What others think doesn't matter. Galatians 1:10, for am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Am I trying to please man? And Paul just hits hard. If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. Galatians 1:10, if you are still trying to please people, bottom line, you're not a servant of Christ. Hebrews 4, that's the scalpel and the surgeon right there, okay? The word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and of spirit, of joints and of marrow, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. So you're going, okay, the word of God is the scalpel, but who's holding the scalpel? The one who loves you best. Okay, so we need to let God's word expose our sin, uncover our iniquities, lay bare our excuses. It forces us to realize we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. God's word shows us we're not all that. It's the source of all wisdom. It shows our motives. But look at the one who's holding the scalpel to help make us right, to get rid of the junk. Test me, O God, and see if there's any way of wickedness in me. Search and test me so I can change those attitudes and thoughts and behaviors that spoil my intimacy with you. Let's just get rid of it. I know my favorite illustration is not always yours. When people talk to me after class about what they liked, it's very rarely what I liked. But I like this one, okay? This is just, I think it comes right to the heart of what a lot of us do. The guy's name was Ed Gilbreth, and he talks about a chilly December evening in downtown Chicago where he and about a dozen students from a suburban Christian college were out Christmas caroling. As they sang, a black man edged closer and eyed Gilbreth, who was the only African American in the group. His head nodded in rhythm with the melody. After the song ended, he approached Gilbreth and said, "Say, brother, would you help my family, please? We don't have any money, and the baby needs formula." The man was in his 20s, but his tired and ragged appearance made him look much older. "Please, man, I need to get us some food," he begged. Gilbreth glanced at the others in the group. They knew the safe response was to politely refuse, yet they were Christians. Weren't they supposed to help needy people? "Would you please help me?" The plea came again. "Just a few dollars." Gilbreth looked at one of his friends in the group. "We can't give you money," Gilbreth's friend finally said, "but we can buy you what you need." If the guy was telling the truth, it was something they had to do. "My name is Jerome," the beggar said as they hiked towards a nearby convenience store. He lived in a city housing project with his wife and 3 kids. As they entered the store, Gilbreth noticed that his eyes seemed to brighten. Maybe they had brought a little hope into his life. Soon they had brought him baby formula, milk, and eggs. This seemed a fitting conclusion to their evening of caroling. Then, as they handed Jerome the groceries and the bus fare, Gilbreth noticed his eyes had darkened into an angry stare. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he said. You think you're all something because you come out from the suburbs buying food for the poor folks. You ain't no better than me. No, Gilbreth replied, struggling to find more words, but nothing came. He realized there was nothing he could say that would change Jerome's mind. After a moment of awkward silence, Jerome grabbed his bag of groceries and walked away. And then he suddenly turned and said sharply, "Merry Christmas." It wasn't a warm wish, but a bitter statement filled with broken pride. The December air blew colder, and no one said a word. There wasn't anything to say. Their holiday spirit had suddenly evaporated, and there was no way to bring it back. Gilbreth said, "We might have resented Jerome and felt justified, but was he wrong? We gave him a gift. He accepted it. Should there have been anything more?" That's sort of how it was at the first Christmas. Jesus wasn't born a helpless baby for applause. He didn't hang on the cross for praise. Listen to that. Jesus wasn't born a helpless baby for applause. He didn't hang on the cross for praise. Those he died for made fun of him. Still, he selflessly gave unconditionally. Gilbreth said, "Why had we expected gratitude and appreciation for our gift to Jerome?" Strangely enough, this is a really wise young man that figured this out. Strangely enough, he said, Jerome gave us something far better than gratitude. He made us look hard at our selfish motives and gave us a sobering lesson on the real reason for giving. We were expecting a pat on the back. Instead, Jerome gave us a glimpse of the true meaning of Christmas. Evidence of right motives. You'll glorify God. You'll change the outcome for your life and the lives of others. We need to stop being motivated by the WIFM factor. WIIFM. What's in it for me? That has to go away. We have to get rid of the WIFM factor. What's in it for me? Matthew 10:8. Jesus commands his disciples, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. That's Matthew 10:8. The ministry Jesus called his disciples to is a ministry motivated by love, a selfless ministry. Really what Jerome was showing the Christians, in quotes, right? Motives, Jesus, others, yourself. Tend to get things in the right order when we look at it that way. What are our motives based on? Jesus and our love for him. The greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? So love for Jesus, love for others. He said that was the second greatest commandment in Matthew 22. You love God, you love people, and you put yourself last. And that brings you joy. Jesus, others, yourself. The most sobering one, and we've talked about it a little bit before towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7, when Jesus said, and Matthew 7 just moved out of my Bible, but we'll be there in a sec. Okay, Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven." On that day, on the last day, on that day, many will say to me, "Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do mighty works in your name?" And then will I declare to them, "I never knew you. Depart from me." It struck me this morning as I was going over it again. Jesus said 3 times, they did good things, right? Well, the people said, did we not prophesy? They prophesied, they cast out demons, they did mighty works. They were doing good things. But what stuck out to me was they kept saying, "In your name, in your name, in your name." The name of Jesus is all powerful. So they were doing these things in his name, and he allowed them to do these things, but they were done for the wrong reasons. And now they're standing there expecting their reward. And Jesus said, "I never knew you. Get away from me. I never knew you." They're bound for hell. If that's not sobering for the reason to have right motives, nothing is. We need to do it for God's glory, for our love for him. You can't game God. You can't manipulate God. You can't play God. He knows everything. We may chafe at being invisible when everything in us wants to be seen and appreciated. However, we need to learn that we're always in full view of God. And until that's enough for us, our lives will never produce a harvest. We may chafe at being invisible when everything in us wants to be seen and appreciated. However, we must learn that we're always in full view of God, and until that's enough for us, our life will never produce a harvest. Let's go to 2 Kings 9 and 10. We're going to look at a guy who God gave a job to. Okay, God gave this guy a job. The guy goes and does it well, but he doesn't do it for the right reasons. Okay, and it's 2 full chapters, so we're going to go through it and just keep bringing out the high points. But some of the things you're going to see in here is how very well the Lord knows us. Okay, how very well. He knows every hair on your head. He knows every motive of your heart. He knows absolutely everything about you, and you're going to see that here. And I really think this is why the Bible is true. There is a lot of unflattering stuff in here, isn't there? I had a new believer come up to me and say, Kara, where's all the good people in the Bible? You know, she was reading through Genesis. Where's all the good people? I says, well, there's no good people here, right? We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And the Bible is true and it's honest. So we see this guy here. Elisha calls the sons of one of the prophets and said, I need you to go anoint a king over Israel. It's in verse 3 of 2 Kings 9. Thus saith the Lord, I want you to go anoint Jehu, king over Israel. And then listen, and then open the door and flee. Do not linger. That should get our attention right there. So Elisha's telling this prophet, go anoint this guy king and run like heck. Get out of there. Going, okay, why? We're going to find out soon why. But Samuel wasn't told to go anoint Saul and run. He wasn't told to go anoint David and run. But what is it about this Jehu guy? You need to anoint him and then run. So the young man does it. He goes and anoints Jehu. He says in verse 6, I anoint you king, and you're going to strike down the house of Ahab, your master, so I may avenge on Jezebel the blood of my servants and the prophets. The whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond and free, in Israel. And the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the territory of Jezreel. None shall bury her. And he opened the door and fled. So a prophet goes to give a prophecy. He says it as fast as he can, and then he runs as fast as he can. What's the prophecy? Jehu, your job is to go wipe out the house of Ahab. And let's get Jezebel too. Okay? They brought idol worship full blast into Israel. The prophets of Baal, they brought them all in. They started worshiping instead of the true God. They started worshiping a little g god, Baal. Okay? And so God is going to take his vengeance now. Okay, so he tells Jehu, your job is to go wipe out the whole house of Ahab. So Jehu comes to the servants, and they say, is everything okay? And, oh yeah, you know the guy in his talk. And he said, the Lord said, I'm anointed king over Israel. In verse 13, then in haste, every man of them took his garment and put it under him on the bare steps. And they blew the trumpet and proclaimed, Jehu is king. So the guy gets the red carpet treatment. The prophet says, I anoint you. Jehu goes out to the guy and says, I'm going to be the king of Israel. And they put all their cloaks down, and he walks over them. Okay, and then he goes out, and he starts. He starts doing what God has told him to do. Verse 16, he mounts his chariot, goes to Jezreel, and the current king of Israel and the king of Judah are there. Verse 17, a watchman is standing in the tower, and he sees Jehu coming. And he says, I see a company. And they send out a guy, and they go out and say, are you here in peace? That's a good question. The watchman's in the tower, coming towards the city. They send somebody out to Jehu. Are you coming in peace? And Jehu says, what do you have to do with peace? Get behind me. So now this guy's following Jehu. So they send another guy out. And he goes up to Jehu, and he says, do you come in peace? And Jehu says, get behind me. What does peace have to do with you? And you're going, okay, rather strong personality here. Okay, starting to see. Okay. And again, the watchman reported he reached them, but he didn't come back. And I love this in verse 20. This is one of the ways I told you God knows everything about us. Listen to this. Again, the watchman reported he reached them, but he's not coming back. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, for he drives furiously. They are remarking on someone's driving in the Bible. The guy drives furiously. He drives intensely. What would they say about your driving? Okay, God knows. Whether it was chariot rage or horse rage or whatever's going on, the watchman looks out and says, that guy drives like Jehu. I want it on my license plate now anyway, but look at that. Look at the detail. You tell me God's word's not true when he's even talking about how the guy drives. Okay? So then they go meet the two kings. The two kings, the king of Israel, currently, before Jehu moves up, and the king of Judah. And Jehu kills both of them. And he starts his rampage because God told him to wipe out the descendants of Ahab, every man. So he starts with the kings. Even though Uzziah had some of the line of David, he had some of David's line blood, Jehu kills them both, even when they try to run away. So Jehu's starting to be this one-man wrecking crew. He's just killing everybody in sight, but God had told him to kill the descendants of Ahab. And then we get to verse 30. Jehu comes to Jezreel. Jezebel heard of it. So Jehu's coming for judgment, right? It's already been prophesied because Ahab and Jezebel were so bad that they're under God's judgment. They've brought idol worship into Israel. So here Jehu comes to kill Jezebel. And what does Jezebel do in verse 30? She paints her eyes and adorns her head and looks out the window. The chick's putting on her makeup. Ladies, judgment is coming. Jehu, who they even recognize by his driving, he's wiped out all these people. He's at her door. And what's she doing? Come on, read Revelation. Judgment is coming. What are you going to be caught doing? And if any of you are putting on makeup and fixing your hair, I'll kick your butt myself. Okay? That's not what we're supposed to be doing as judgment approaches. That's insane. But that's what she's doing. Is that going to change anything? She wants to look good for Satan? That's where she's going. But look at how messed up we can get. Judgment can come tomorrow. And I promise, I'm not saying ignore your personal appearance because judgment could be coming tomorrow. I'm just saying, don't be stupid. This is, right here is stupidity, right in our Bible. Judgment's coming right at her, and she's painting her eyes and adorning her hair. And to show how beloved she is, she sees him, and she says, is it peace? I'm sure he wants to say, you think? You're a murderer of your master? He lifts up his face to the window and said, who is on my side? Who? This is really cool, again, with the Bible being true, verse 32. So he says, up into the window where she's looking all pretty now. Jezebel was a beautiful lady anyway, so she's up in the window, she's looking pretty, she's put her makeup on, she's done her hair, and she's standing there with her eunuchs. Eunuchs were castrated servants. The king didn't want any nonsense between the king and the queen and the servants, so they would castrate them. And so these were her guys, her servants, her 24/7 guys. And Jehu looks up and says, who's on my side? So the eunuchs throw her out the window. That's how much loyalty this woman has engendered. Okay, the eunuchs toss her out the window, and she goes splat. Okay, literally, it says right here. They threw her down, some of her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled her. Jehu, the kind, compassionate soul, he goes to eat and drink. And then he said, see now to this cursed woman and bury her, for she's a king's daughter. But when they went to bury her, they found no more of her than her skull and her feet and the palm of her hands. Skull, feet, palm of her hands. Bob Utley, I love him. He does my research so I don't have to. He is really into the old kings, like he can tell you everything about them. He actually found, he researched where they found some cannibals, and they interviewed cannibals because, that's what people do. And so we went and he talked to these cannibals. They said the most bitter parts of the human body are the palms of the hand and the feet. So that's why Jezebel, the dogs didn't want to eat that. Now you know. Okay, you came to Bible study today, and you know that the most bitter part of a human body to eat is the palm of the hands and the feet. Okay, you learned something today. Okay, but that's all that was left of her. And you know what? In the Near East, desecrating a body was worse than death. It's the ultimate sign of disrespect. So they just left her like that. So he's been doing what he's supposed to do. Jezebel's gone. All these other guys are gone. And you'll see chapter 10, when it says Ahab had 70 sons, that means male descendants. They could have been nephews or whatever. Jehu goes and wipes them out. And then in verse 11 of chapter 10, he strikes down all that remain in the house of Ahab. And then there's some relatives of Uzziah, so he slaughters them, 42 of them. They were shepherds, and he killed them just because they had distant blood of Ahab in them. He spared none of them, it says in verse 14. And then he meets a good guy in verse 15, Rechab. He's Jeremiah 35, 1-19. When you look at them, if you want to look it up, if you want to go deeper, He meets Jehonadab, the son of Rechab. He goes to meet him, and he says, is your heart true to my heart? They were like Nazarites. Remember in the New Testament, the Nazarites, they wouldn't drink wine, they wouldn't cut their hair, those kind of things. Those were what these people did too. Okay, so he's a good guy, so Jehu doesn't kill him. But look at Jehu has his Pharisee moment in verse 16. He says to this good guy, he said, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. He said, hey, look at me, Pharisee. Hey, come see my zeal for the Lord. Watch me kill all these people in God's name in chapter 16. So he gets in the chariot with him, and off he goes on his killing spree again, kills all the prophets of Baal, and he reigns in Israel. 28. Thus Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. He did the job God told him to do. He told him to wipe out all the descendants of Ahab because they'd brought idolatry in. And in verse 28, Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. He did a good job. He took his task from God and he did it, but he never gave his heart to God. Okay? So here's the but again. But Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam when he made Israel to sin. This is what that's talking about. So he did what God told him to do. He went and wiped out all the descendants of Ahab because who's going to be king now? Jehu. He wiped out all the guys that could oppose him. He did what God wanted him to do, except he didn't go out and destroy the golden calf worship, the sins of Jeroboam. He didn't destroy the golden calves in Bethel or Dan. Why not? That was political idolatry, if you want to look at it that way. What they did was they set up those 2 golden calves up there in northern Israel, so those 10 tribes wouldn't go down into Jerusalem and worship at the house of the true God. They set them up so the people didn't have to go to the temple. And the reason for that was they were afraid that the country was going to unify again, and the northern kings were going to lose their power. So Jehu obeyed God only as much as it benefited him. Not pure motives. Yeah, I'll wipe out the house of Ahab because that's good for me. Now they won't be there to oppose me, but I'm not going to go get rid of these golden calves and stuff that you don't like, God, because that doesn't help me. But Jehu, he didn't turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam. He didn't go take care of that, which Jezebel had set up. She was part of everything. She was part of Baal worship. She were for anything. She didn't set it up. I misspoke on that. Jeroboam set it up, but she was for everything that would take people away from the true God because she was being driven by Satan. Okay? But Jehu, and then it says in verse 31, just in case we missed it, but Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord with all of his heart. He only followed God's word as much as it benefited him. Motives matter. In Hosea 1:4, it talks about wiping them out. He let it go to the 4th generation, God did, the 4th generation of Jehu because of the good he did. But then he didn't let his line go beyond that because he wasn't wholehearted towards the Lord. We've got to make sure our motives are right so we don't implode. 18 June 2023, you all remember that? Remember that Titan submersible that went down that they couldn't find? Let's look at the backstory on that just real quick, and then we're going to go to Psalm 139 to make sure that never happens to us. In the 50 years that they've been doing submersibles, they've never lost one. They've never lost one. Even though it's increased by 2,000%, the amount they're launching, they've never lost one. So why did this one get lost? Well, because of Stockton Rush, the guy that owned OceanGate, he thought he was right about everything. He wouldn't allow anyone to examine his submersible. He wouldn't even examine it himself. And this is what it looked like. They make the things out of titanium, okay, so they can handle the pressures. It is just so cool the way this points to God. When you make something out of titanium and you put pressure on it, it gets stronger. Okay, that's why we go through trials, right? God's making us stronger. That's how titanium works too. He built it out of carbon fiber. You know what happens when you put pressure on carbon fiber? It gets weaker. But he knew better. So he didn't take the approved solution. He made it out of carbon fiber for his reasons. When all these experts came and said, that's not going to work, you're going to have problems, he didn't listen because he knew better. This is how the extent of his pride and hubris. They took a 1/3 model. He built a 1/3 model of one of these, and they did put it in a pressure chamber. They took it to 4,000 pounds per square inch. The one that they were sending down to look at the Titanic, there was going to be 6,000 pounds per square inch. But they just tested it, tested a 1/3 model in, it imploded at 4,000 pounds per square inch. And he did nothing to fix it because he knew better. The laws of nature, like gravity and pressure, are the laws of nature. The laws of God are the laws of God. And we can't change those. But he knew better. He hired this guy, and he brought him in. His name was David Lockridge, 30 years in the Royal Navy over in Britain. He's an engineer. He's a submersible pilot. Okay, he knows all about those things. He wrote a 10-page report on how dangerous this thing was. You know what Stockton Rush did? He fired him and sued him. He didn't want to hear that. This is the Holy Spirit coming to us, ladies. You got to work on this. You got to work on this. And we just put him on ignore. So he came and he said, you can't do this, you can't do it. He did it anyway. And then we know the end result. They're down at the bottom of the ocean and they're just crushed. And you know what he said? He said his reason for why he was so smart, he goes, because they didn't do non-destructive inspection. We're going to talk about that. When I was in the Air Force too, we needed to make sure the wings were firmly attached to the airplane. It tends to be important, right? You want your wings firmly attached? We would do what was called non-destructive inspections. We would x-ray the whole airplane. And this is a really big deal with big airplanes, but they would x-ray them, look for cracks in the wings, make sure the bolts were right. Solomon Rush would not allow a non-destructive inspection of his sub. He said, we'll hear when it starts cracking. We'll hear. They went on a mission before the one that went down. They said it sounded like blood-curdling screams and gunshots, the way these things were cracking. And he said it was no problem and took it down again. Look at all this. We need to allow the Lord to do a non-destructive inspection on us because he's the one that loves us best. Let's go to Psalm 139. I know you know this. I know you're very familiar with it. But let's look at it in the way of motives, okay? Just look at what God wants to do for us and in us. David begins right in with the first verse. Oh, Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. That word search in Hebrew, it's a military term. It's like going in and searching out the enemy. We see it with Joshua and Caleb when they were going into the promised land. They were searching it out. They were scoping it out. And David just begins with, oh, Lord, you've searched me, and you know me. And just look at verses 2 through 6. Look at all the yous. Look at all the divine involvement. You know, God knows every hair on your head. Yeah, I know. But listen to this. You know when I sit down and rise up. You discern my intentions. Your translation may say thoughts. In Hebrew, it's intentions. You discern my intentions and my motives from afar. You search out my path. You're acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand on me, your hand of grace. Look at this. He's saying, you know me. You love me. You're with me every second. You, the divine involvement. And he's involved in our lives like that too, if we let him be. If we let him be, if we just, I want you in my life. I want all the yous in my life. In verse 5, when it says, you hem me in, you hedge me in, we could say, well, that's kind of uncomfortable. That's kind of a big brother thing. I don't know about you. I want to be hedged in. I want to be under God's protection. I pray that over my kids and my grandkids every night. Lord, hedge them in. Please hem them in. Please surround them. Look at that beautiful picture. When the world's bombarding you, when your flesh is bombarding you, when Satan's bombarding you, you are hemmed in by God. You're going to have the ultimate victory if you've asked Jesus to walk this walk with you and take you to heaven. A friend of mine just mentioned this weekend, he had told his daughter, she was going out with a friend, and he said, don't forget, be home by 11, that's your curfew. And Sarah might have been a little embarrassed in front of her friend, but I guess as they went out, the friend said, boy, I wish I had somebody who cared enough about me to give me a curfew. Teenage girl recognized that. That's what this is saying. He's got you hemmed in. God wants you to have a curfew. He wants to take care of you. He wants to surround you. And then David admits such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's high. I can't attain it. This is called omniscience. It's God knowing everything. But think about it for a minute. It's not just that God knows everything. He knows you. It's not just that God is everywhere. He's everywhere with you. And it's not just that God created everything, he created you. That's what omniscience looks like. You're surrounded and it's good. You're incredibly loved. You're cherished. You're adored. And then he talks about God's omnipresence in verses 7 through 11. That's that God's everybody. He goes, where can I go? Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? You're in heaven. If I made my bed in Sheol, even then your hand shall lead me. Your right hand should hold me. God is so close to you. David said, he's holding your hand. We talked about that some last week. God is holding your hand. Your right hand shall hold me. What a beautiful picture. We're going through this sewer that's becoming our world, and God's holding your hand. Come on, my girl, let's go. I'm going to take you through this. I'm going to take you home, and boy, wait till you see it there. It's better than we can even describe. The Bible doesn't even talk about heaven that much because there's just not words. You can really look at Revelation 4 and 5 and the throne and some different things, but it's indescribable. It's not just a Chris Tomlin song. It truly is, okay? And then he talks about, you form my inward parts. God watched you be formed. God made you formed in your mother's womb. David knew nothing about all the biology we know now, but he knows that life begins at conception. And that's what he said. You form my inward parts. You knit me together. I praise you for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Fearfully means reverent awe. We should have reverent awe for the way God has made us. Look at this view of God. God is infinite, but he's intimate. Okay, God is infinite, yet intimate. God is high and lifted up, but he's close and near. He's right with you. He's transcendent, he's above all, but he's imminent. He's coming back. So he's infinite and intimate. Look at this towering view of God. High and lifted up, but close and near. Derek Kidner is a really good Old Testament scholar. He goes, any small thoughts we have of God are magnificently transcended in this psalm. Yet for all its height and depth, it remains intensely personal from first to last. So he's saying, you were in God's workshop, and he watched you being made. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. This is saying God gets you. God gets you. He understands you. He's watched everything. There was a little girl visiting over at Grandpa's house, and she crawled up in his lap and said, Grandpa, did God make you? Oh, yes, honey. God made me a long time ago. Grandpa, did God make me too? Oh, yes, honey. God created you a little while ago. She thought for a few minutes, and she said, God's been doing better work lately, hasn't he? Okay. Again, out of the mouths of babes. But listen to this. They didn't give a name, so I can't attribute the quote, but I thought this was excellent. Instead of showing appreciation to God for how he created us, we criticize God for how he didn't create us. Instead of praising him that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, we blame him for not following our specifications. Ever thought about that? Instead of praising him that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, we blame him for not following our specifications. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed before me. You wrote down all my days, God, before I even had any. And then don't miss the wonder. This is one of those where, we know Psalm 139, fearfully. Don't miss the wonder of this. David in verse 17, how precious to me are your intentions, God, your thoughts. How precious to me are they? How vast is the sum of them? God is thinking of you all the time. Look what he says. If I could count your thoughts, God, they're more than the sand. He's thinking about you all the time in a good way. And he says, if I awake, I'm still with you. Look at what he's saying. If I awake, I'm still with you. He goes, and this isn't even a dream. This incredible, awesome, amazing love, I'm not even dreaming it. It's true. When I'm awake and doing bad things, he still loves me. When I'm awake and not even aware of him, he still loves me. I'm awake and I'm still with you. And then there's this shift from 19 to 22, and he starts talking about enemies and men of blood, and they speak against you with malicious intent. Don't I hate those who hate you, O Lord? You're going, wow, that's quite a transition, isn't it? But you know what? David's just saying, God, I hate those that hate you. I love you so much. I love you so much, God, that your enemies are my enemies. This is just another way. Remember, David's a warrior. Another way of declaring his love. That's all it is. That's why the transition is like that. And then while we're here, the whole reason for this in this lesson, verse 23, search me, O God, and know my heart. David just talked about these guys who are sinning in obvious ways, the people with malicious intent who are taking your name in vain. But God, what about me? This is the bravest prayer I think you can pray. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there is any grievous way in me, and lead me in way everlasting. So God, I trust you. That's what he's saying. He's gone through the whole psalm talking about how great God is and how much God loves us. And then he's saying, okay, to you, and it should be to you and you alone, I'm opening up my heart. Show me what's in here. Show me the depths, Lord. Show me the stuff you want me to work on. Show me. And we need to name it and claim it. And you're going, oh, I thought that name it and claim it stuff was bad. The name it and claim it stuff, that type of gospel is, if I name that I have healing, I claim I have healing and I'm healed. They don't bring God's will into it. If I name that I want that thing, then I can claim it that it's mine now. Okay, that's the name it and claim it gospel. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this is name it and claim it. Name your sin. I did this, God. You showed me. You revealed it to me when you searched me. I lied. I claim that I lied. And then name it and claim it. Repent. I'm sorry I lied, Lord. I am so sorry. Please help me not do that anymore. I name it and claim it. I confess it, repent it, and ask him to come help me. That's what it looks like as we're being searched. And I promise, I can testify to you, when you ask God, when you say, search me and show me what I'm doing, he does it a little bit at a time. Because I know with me, if the dump truck landed on my lawn with all the stuff I've done, it's be like, where do you start? But God in his grace, he wants that relationship. He wants us to fix it, so he'll show you a little bit at a time. You did this. I am really sorry, God. And then it was out of pride that you did that. Oh, Lord, please, I struggle with that. Please help me. He'll show you a little bit at a time. Search me and know me and show me. Look at what Stockton Rush didn't do. Don't show me. I don't want to know it. I'm not going to fix it. I know best. And he imploded. He died at the bottom of the ocean. It's probably even lower than that now, if you know what I'm saying, okay? Don't do that. Know me and show me. Search me, know me, show me. And God in his grace does it a little bit at a time. It's really sad. This psychotherapist, her name's Dr. Linda Gottlieb, really well known. She said it used to be that people came in for psychotherapy, which is to help unearth the stuff we need to work on. You know what she said? She said she's seen a dramatic shift. People aren't coming in for help like that anymore. They're coming in for problems with other people. Tell me how to fix my husband. Tell me how to fix my kid. Tell me how to fix this. We go right back to our intensely personal psalm. Show me, Lord, how to fix me. And help me. Every step of the way, please help me. Bring it out in the open. Of course, I've got to give you a gross example because we have those too. But Dan and Chip Heath wrote the book Made to Stick, okay? And it was written by a doctor. He'd talk about a doctor who was trying to get his colleagues to wash their hands. This is a doctor in a hospital, okay? Dr. Leon Bender became frustrated when he took a cruise and he noticed the crew was more diligent about hand washing than the staff at his own hospital. Frequent hand washing by doctors and nurses is the best way to prevent infection, right? Numerous techniques failed to improve upon the 80% of the staff. 80% were not washing their hands. One day, a committee of 20 doctors and administrators were taken by surprise when, after lunch, the hospital's epidemiologist asked them to press their hands into an agar plate. It's a sterile petri dish that contains a growth medium. The agar plates were then sent to the lab to be cultured and photographed. The photos revealed what wasn't visible to the naked eye. The doctor's hands were covered with gobs of bacteria. Imagine being one of those doctors and realizing that your own hands, the hands that would examine a patient later in the day, the hands that just held your turkey sandwich, they were harboring an army of microorganisms. It was revolting. They took the filthiest image and made it a screensaver for the whole hospital network, showing you what's really there, okay? They concluded we usually won't change our behavior until we see and even feel how we contribute to the problems in our world and our relationships. Graphic example, but we can go to the Lord and ask him to do that for us. Search me, know me, show me. If we need an example of right motives, We don't have to go any further than our Lord Jesus Christ. Think about the Garden of Gethsemane. Think about when he was in such anguish, he was sweating blood. What that means is what was happening to him physically was all the capillaries at the surface of his skin were bursting. Jesus was under such intense stress that the capillaries at the surface of his skin were bursting. He was literally sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing that Judas was going to come kiss him, and then he gets led to the cross, and he's going to be absolutely tortured by everything they can possibly do to inflict the most pain on him, and he's going to die for us. So you've got the perfect sinless one, the one who's never done anything wrong in that garden, sweat and blood. You think if his motives weren't right, he wouldn't have gotten up and run for his life literally? If you ever need to see an example of perfect motives, it's our Lord who never did anything wrong and took our punishment in the most painful way possible. That's our example of perfect motives. Our example is he. Okay, we try to live like he does. He followed the will of God. He glorified God, and he loved us enough to do that. So our motives should be driven by love of God and love of people. And we need to make sure we're there, and we need to make sure we're right. I'm just going to close with this. I thought this was really touching. Lord Kenneth Clark, one of Great Britain's most prominent art historians. He's an author. He produces stuff for the BBC television station. In an autobiographical account, he writes about when he was living in a villa in France, and he had a curious episode, true story. He said, I had a religious experience. It took place in the church of Saint Lorenz, where for a few minutes my whole being was radiated by a kind of heavenly joy, far more intense than I'd ever experienced before. Heavenly joy, far more intense than anything he'd ever experienced. This state of mind lasted for several minutes, but as wonderful as it was, it posed an awkward problem in terms of action. My life was far from blameless. I would have to reform. Just like us. Search me, know me, show me. He said, my family would think I was going mad, and perhaps after all it was a delusion, for I in every way was unworthy of such a flood of grace. He recognized it. I, in every way, was unworthy of a flood of such grace, just like we are. Gradually, the effect wore off, and I made no effort to retain it. I think I was right. I was too deeply embedded in the world to change course, but I had felt the finger of God, quite sure. And although the memory of the experience has faded, it still helps me to understand the joy of the saints. This guy said no to search me, know me, show me. And he, by his own words, experienced that flood of grace and walked away from it. Just ask the Lord to search you and show you so you can draw closer to him. It's well worth the moments of discomfort to have that intimacy and that fellowship with Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Lord, thank you. I thank you that though your words can be hard sometimes, you are good, and you just have a heart of love for us. Lord, I pray that we will just empower you to search us and know us and show us so that our walk with you can even be closer. Lord, I pray that today you flood every single lady with that river of grace, that every single one of us can feel your presence and your love and your grace and your mercy and your peace. Jesus, I pray that you just give them such peace in their hearts as we go through this process. Father, I pray that it's the peace that transcends all understanding, the kind that skips our head and goes right to our hearts and go, oh gosh, thank you for the healing, Lord. Thank you, dear God, for the healing, the forgiveness, and the grace and the mercy. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for loving us enough to die for us on the cross. In your precious name, amen.